When Mildred's family left her at the care facility, it felt like abandonment. For 2 years, they rarely visited or called, leaving her feeling isolated and forgotten. But through it all, there was one constant source of comfort: her grandson, Thomas. To Mildred, Thomas was a beacon of kindness. While others seemed to have turned their backs on her, he remained steadfast, visiting every weekend and calling whenever he could. Hearing from him became the highlight of her days. Yet, Thomas wasn't quite the saint Mildred believed him to be. Her worsening dementia clouded her understanding of the situation. Over the years, her condition had deteriorated significantly, something her family struggled to cope with. Mildred thought their distance was a sign of abandonment, but the truth was far more complicated. When she finally uncovered it, the revelation brought a whirlwind of heartbreak and a simmering desire for revenge. When Thomas came to visit Mildred, he often told her that the family saw her as a burden and that they wanted nothing to do with her. It hurt her deeply, especially after she heard the bitterness in their voices when she called. It seemed like Thomas was the only one who still cared. He also told his grandma that the family wasn't happy about his visits. They were so unhappy about it that they stopped inviting him to family get-togethers. It seemed like he was being treated just as badly as she was, but that couldn't be further from the truth. It was just another part of his elaborate web of lies. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming stories. Because of what Thomas told her, Mildred started resenting her family. She felt terrible about him being treated like a stranger because he was there for her. To her, it sounded like he was sacrificing so much of his life to make her happy, and that didn't sit well with her at all. On one visit, Thomas even told her that the family had decided to put her in the care home. That statement really made her sad. Mildred suggested that Thomas follow in the footsteps of the rest of the family, but her grandson wouldn't stand for it. That was when Mildred started noticing certain things. Every now and then, Thomas would mention that he was having money problems. He claimed that he had lost his job and that he was having difficulty paying his mortgage. That made Mildred feel even worse. She thought it was partly her fault and felt that she needed to do something to help her devoted grandson. Mildred took a few days to consider her options. She wasn't rich, but when everything she had was put together, it would come to a decent amount. She decided it would only be fair for her to give her entire inheritance to Thomas. But what Mildred didn't see was that she was being misled by the only person she trusted. Thomas wasn't so innocent after all. Mildred had originally planned to split her inheritance between her sons, but after what they put her through, they didn't deserve it. She had made up her mind. She'd give everything to her grandson, as he deserved it more than anyone else. However, there was a slight issue with the will that had been standing for so long. It wasn't so easy to alter the information. When Mildred created her will, things worked differently than they do now. There were different rules and stipulations attached to it, which would create one major issue that Mildred wanted to avoid. What problem was she trying to avoid? Her sons would be informed of her planned changes, but that wasn't even the worst part. They also had the right to object to them since they were the only people in line to receive anything. But Mildred hoped they would understand instead of going against her. Mildred was determined to go through with it, though, so she got on the phone and discussed everything with her lawyer. Luckily, he was all too happy to deal with everything. Mildred dreaded what her sons would think of her after they found out, but she would deal with it when it came to that. At least then she would be able to speak her mind. Yes, she could use her voice and say it. By the next day, the paperwork was ready, and the lawyer informed Mildred's sons, Mike and Dave, of the changes. Mildred was anxious as she waited for her sons to call. She had expected to hear from them, but she never expected what they would say. Early the next morning, Mildred got a call from Thomas, and he seemed upset. He found out that his father and uncle would pay her a visit, and he was determined to convince her not to see them. Within an hour, Thomas was knocking on her door. Thomas was livid, and he tried to talk Mildred out of seeing her sons, but she was adamant about hearing their side of the story. That didn't sit too well with her grandson. He shouted, begged, pleaded, and argued. But when he saw that Mildred wasn't going to change her mind, his entire attitude changed. With a huff, Thomas stormed off, leaving his distraught grandmother on the brink of tears. She had no idea why he was acting the way he did, but she would find out soon enough. An hour later, Mike and Dave knocked on the door, and for some inexplicable reason, they looked happy and relieved that their mother had allowed them to come. That contradicted everything Thomas had said to her over the last few months, and she was starting to wonder why her grandson had been lying. When Mildred brought the subject up, her sons shared a look, and she instantly knew she was being misled. Dave informed her that they wanted nothing more than to visit her, but Thomas had told them that her condition was worsening and that she preferred it if they stayed away. They also told her that Thomas had lied about everything else. After Mildred heard everything her sons had to say, she was devastated. For the past 2 years, she thought her children wanted nothing to do with her. She had spent her time wondering what she had done to deserve this, but now she knew it was all her fault. If she hadn't believed Thomas, she could have been with her sons. The truth was that Mildred was out for revenge. Now that she knew what Thomas wanted, she would make sure he wouldn't get it. But how would she do it? Before Mike and Dave left, Mildred asked them for one last favor. She wanted them to act as if Thomas had gotten his way, and she needed them to stay quiet about what was discussed. They were delighted with the fact that they could spend some much-needed time with their mother during her final days. But what was Mildred up to, and how would Thomas find out about his fate? After her sons left, Mildred set out to arrange the final pieces of her life's journey. She wrote a letter to each of her children and grandchildren. She wanted to thank them for the parts they played in her life, but the letter to Thomas was going to be a little different. What she had to say to him would destroy everything he thought he had built. A couple of days later, Dave and Mike got a call from the nursing home. Mildred had passed on the night before, and she wanted them to be the first to know. Thomas told everyone that Mildred had asked him to arrange the funeral, and his father and uncle were all too happy to let him do it. On the day of the funeral, Thomas was front and center. He wanted all attention to be on him while he anxiously awaited the call from the lawyer, but the call never came. At the funeral, a lawyer arrived accompanied by representatives from a company Thomas didn't recognize. They quickly set up a monitor, and within moments, Thomas's carefully constructed lies began to unravel. The room fell silent as Mildred's voice echoed through the crowd, her words laced with both sorrow and resolve. "For so long, I believe you all wanted nothing to do with me," she began, her face appearing on the screen. "But now I know the truth. It was all a lie, carefully spun by Thomas." Mildred had gone to great lengths to reveal her grandson's betrayal in front of the entire family. As her words sunk in, the atmosphere shifted, and Thomas realized there would be no escaping the storm of anger and disappointment that was about to come his way. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comment section. I hope you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up and share it with your loved ones. Also subscribe and press the bell icon to never miss the update from our channel. Thank you.